LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the February 19th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup, my 200th episode, 200 weeks in a row. Well, pretty close. There's one little glitch in there that I don't want to go into, but I appreciate all of you who've been joining me for 200 weeks, or those of you who are joining me for the first time. If you're joining me for the first time, this is my roundup of the weekend's 21 best clips. Most newsworthy clips from what should be a really educational, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. As usual, my clips come mostly from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. And you can see the three subtopics of the main topic. Actually, the third subtopic is Bill Maher versus Milo Yiannopoulos, which was a little underwhelming, but I have two clips from that, and I'm saving that to the end if that's something that interests you. If you're watching as a recorded show, I put links down in the video description that show you where each topic starts with a time index, so you can click on the topic that most interests you or go back to the beginning if you want to watch it over again. There's also a link to this clip list, my 21 clips and one still image I'll be going through. I have, like I said, mostly come from the corporate news media. There's one clip from Democracy Now! Of Glenn Greenwald talking about the deep state. And of course I have, I think 4 or 5 clips. Yeah, 5 clips from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher last Friday. Not just the 2 Milo Yiannopoulos clips at the end, but a few on this whole Russia thing, which is the first big topic that I have the most clips on. It's either Trump versus Russia or Trump versus the CIA and the deep state, depending on how you look at it. Well, last week I talked about National Security Advisor Michael Flynn being in trouble. In the last week now, he's resigned because of his contacts with Russia, and it has implications for Donald Trump's presidency and how it may be tied to Russia even beyond the way Russia tried to affect the U.S. elections. So I'll be talking about that. Then Trump's attacks on the press and the media, both at his press conference and then this tweet calling the media the enemy of the American people. I'll have several clips on that before I get to Milo Yiannopoulos at the end. But like I said, I'm starting off with the Russia topic, and the first clip I want to show is a joke about what's been going on. I mean, it's not very funny, but Bill Maher actually doesn't sound like he thinks it's so funny. He's actually talking about how could be the biggest scandal ever, I'll show you this clip from his monologue. And by the way, the entire monologue is available at a YouTube video from the Real Time channel on YouTube. This is the minute and 47-second clip from that monologue I wanted to pick out for you and discuss with you after we watch together here.
Well, there's the circus that happens every week, the distractions that take us away from knowing what's really important, which is there is an unprecedented state of crisis in this country. There is. The National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn, resigned because of his illegal contacts with Russia. I know the president would like to say that's fake news. That's not fake news. This is the most serious political scandal we've ever had in the United States. And now the question turns to how deep was the involvement of President Trump, or as Russia calls him, Agent Orange. And what is going on in this country is the intelligence agencies are leaking like crazy because they are trying to send a desperate message that this is not just a different kind of president, as the Republican enablers like. He's a different kind of president. He's sweet. No, he's fucking nuts and he's dangerous, and they know it. They know it, and they're trying to tell us that. You know what makes the intelligence agencies go nuts? Scenes like this from Mar-a-Lago this last weekend when he was with the Japanese prime minister and they got news at dinner that the North Koreans had launched a missile. So Trump thought he would, just handle it at dinner in an open-air restaurant. He's with the Japanese prime minister. They probably handle intelligence briefings like they do at their steakhouses, right there at your table. Yeah, this is crazy.
So that was how Bill Maher handled it in the jokes. He talked about it being a big scandal, and that I wanted to show that clip not so much for the jokes there, but because he gets back into that issue when he gets to his panel and makes some pretty extraordinary claims about how we should be rooting for the CIA to overthrow the Trump administration almost. And pretty much in direct contrast to what I'm going to show from Glenn Greenwald. But before I get to that clip from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher last Friday, and I have two clips on that, on the whole Russia issue, I want to show how the news programs this morning covered some of these same issues. And this isn't just on the Russia thing, it's basically on how Trump's week's been going, how the week's been going for Donald Trump, his problems with Russia, his problems with the press. This is sort of an overview, and I'm going to show two different news programs. First, NBC, which is much, I think, more critical about the turmoil in the Trump administration, and then ABC, where I think they try to give like the views from the two Americas, like the pro-Trump forces might be seeing it positively, while all the sane people in America are wondering what in the world is going on. But that's more the perspective I think you get from NBC's Meet the Press this morning with Chuck Todd in this 3.5-minute report you can see here.
That President Trump is facing right now. In just the past week, the president fired his national security advisor, Mike Flynn, saw his labor secretary nominee have to drop out, forced to react to a report that his staff had repeated contacts with Russian officials during the campaign, and realized that congressional Republicans were becoming more emboldened to both distance themselves from the president and investigate his team's ties to Russia. And he watched his poll numbers in Gallup plummet to historic lows for this phase of a presidency. So it was no surprise that the president sought to go back to what he does best, communicate directly with the American people, first through a televised news conference and then at yesterday's boisterous rally.
Please welcome.
President Trump was back on the stump last night for what his team called a campaign rally, more than 1,350 days before the next presidential election.
Despite all their lies, misrepresentations, and false stories, they could not defeat us in the primaries, and they could not defeat us in the general election. We will continue to win, win, win.
Mr. Trump is hoping to shore up his base after a bruising week and to put pressure on Republican lawmakers who are returning home and are being greeted by an angry opposition.
Ever since the election, I have felt like a passenger in a car that's being driven by a drunk driver. Your hands on the emergency brake.
This week, Mr. Trump returned to a well-worn playbook. He held a 77-minute flood-the-zone-style news conference and spent much of it defending his own performance.
This administration is running like a fine-tuned machine.
And the president selected and targeted enemies, including the intelligence community.
The leaks are absolutely real. The news is fake because so much of the news is fake.
And then there's the media. In a tweet on Friday, the president called the media, quote, the enemy of the American people.
They have their own agenda, and their agenda is not your agenda.
But President Trump can't escape the governing problems that have pushed his job approval rating below 40% in several polls after just 30 days in office. White House infighting and chaos, a rejection of his key foreign policy initiative by the courts, and the forced firing of his national security advisor after just 24 days on the job. Then there are the multiplying questions on Russia. At least 7 congressional committees, led by Republicans, say they are investigating issues related to either Russia, former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, or the handling of classified information. At his news conference, Mr. Trump repeatedly was pressed on whether anyone from his campaign had contact with Russian officials, and he would not directly answer the question.
Well, I had nothing to do with it. I have nothing to do with Russia. I told you. I have no deals there. I have no anything.
So you're not aware of any contacts during the course of the election?
How many times do I have to answer this question?
Can you just say
Russia
yes or no
is
on
a
it?
ruse. I have nothing to do with Russia. To the best of my knowledge, no person that I deal with does.
Congressional Republicans are not exactly rushing to defend the president.
The president said in his press conference that nobody he knew of from his campaign was in contact with Russian officials. Do you believe him?
I have no idea.
And joining me now is President.
So that's how NBC Meet the Press reported it. I think critical, although I think more in line with the way I see reality. But of course, my reality is biased by my particular opinions, my knowledge of actual facts, I would say, in a more critical way of those people who may be Trump supporters. And I don't know, you can tell me down in the comment section if you think the NBC report is closer to reality or this ABC report, which has pretty much all the stuff that's in the NBC report, but they kind of like bend over backwards to be like fair and balanced, almost in like the Fox News sense, to give the other side. And At least I think ABC did here. In fact, ABC went and did like a visit with all the Trump voters standing in line to see his rally in Florida yesterday, although I'm not taking a clip from that. But this is the ABC report, kind of on those same facts, but giving more of the Trump view included with the critical view over here.
With a reality check and Trump in his element.
This is the state where we all had great victory together.
A classic high-energy show.
We will make America great again.
Crowds an instant antidote to the poisonous atmosphere back in Washington. And they love him now more than ever.
A star is born. A star is born.
It was as if he never had to fire Flynn, or got smacked by the courts, or lost a cabinet nominee, ran into waves of opposition in the streets, and that deluge of damaging leaks. Trump's search for his old winning ways started with that Thursday throwback.
I'm not ranting and raving. I love this. I'm having a good time doing it.
The most remarkable moment of that extraordinary event, a complete rejection of any suggestion that anything was going wrong.
I turn on the TV, open the newspapers, and I see stories of chaos. Chaos. Yet it is the exact opposite. This administration is running like a fine-tuned machine.
Reality check, Trump is making progress in some of his key promises. Tougher immigration, reworking his travel ban, cutting regulations, picking a conservative Supreme Court nominee. But on many of the big-ticket items, he's treading water. The wall, tax cuts, Obamacare, that infrastructure plan, all still up in the air. And the main source of all of the chaos talk, the turmoil over national security.
Mike Flynn is a fine person, and I asked for his resignation. He respectfully gave it.
In Munich, Germany, at the International Security Conference, Vice President Pence tried to reassure NATO allies. But Pence's efforts to calm European anxieties were overshadowed by the star of the chaos theory camp, Senator John McCain. In a headline-grabbing speech, McCain asked a loaded question: can the West survive? He didn't mention Trump, but he didn't have to.
In recent years, this question would invite accusations of hyperbole and alarmism, not this year. If ever there was a time to treat this question with a deadly seriousness, it is now.
All right, let's bring in Republican Senator Rand.
So I don't know, I guess if you weighed it, it was a little more on the critical side, especially ending with John McCain there saying this year it's a serious year to ask the question, can the West survive? And though he didn't explicitly talk about Donald Trump, and or he didn't reference Donald Trump as to why the West might not survive. And actually, I'm going to show a clip from John McCain later talking about Trump's attack on the press that then Jonathan Karl twists around on ABC when he's talking to Rand Paul to get them like fighting each other. But that's in the next topic. I want to get to the specific clips now on the whole Russia topic, you know, Trump versus Russia, or maybe Trump versus the deep state. And there are two clips from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. The second one's kind of more disturbing, where Bill Maher is kind of like rooting for the CIA and the deep state to overthrow the Trump administration. This first one, though, he kind of introduces it a little more than he did in the monologue clip I showed at the beginning. It's a conversation with Malcolm Nance, who's like a former intelligence officer, and then also former Republican Representative Jack Kingston, who says this Republican talking point that is totally false that I'm going to disprove after we watch that clip together over here.
That you characterized it at the beginning of your monologue, I think was rather mild. I think what we are, and you say it's the greatest scandal in American history. Well, we can put secession aside. This may possibly be the greatest scandal of presidential history, where for the first time in 240 years, we have a president who may have actually had influence and had been elected with the direct assistance, not just of a foreign power, of a foreign intelligence agency. The 4 FISA warrant investigations that are going on right now, people hear the word FISA and they hear FBI and they think, okay, that's great. That's just an investigation. This is this nation's spy hunters are investigating these people, not just regular gumshoe FBI agents.
Yeah,
these are people looking
when the
for foreign
intelligence
spies.
agencies are leaking like this, it seems like they are crying out that we don't want to do a coup,
And Bill, let's be honest. He brings up Obama. No, let's keep it 100 on this. If Obama in 2008, it was thought he was colluding with the Russians, I mean, he was already called a commie at that point.
Yeah.
Do you think he ever would have been elected? I mean, this was called a terrorist
Let me put that to you, Jack. What if it was the reverse? What if it was Hillary Clinton, who was just what we absolutely know? What would you be saying about it?
Well, number one, very, very important. Barack Obama did absolutely know that the Russians were potentially interfering.
Doesn't answer my question.
And in terms of Republicans asking, and you know, I think you're right, shoes on the other foot, there's going to be hell raising. So I agree with you on that. But to say, I think it's way, way too early and way too dramatic to be saying this is the biggest scandal in American history. What is a scandal? Everybody talks about the Logan Act.
The scandal is that the Russians fixed the election for one party.
That's not.
No, you're right. We don't have the proof of that. But the dots are all there.
No, the intelligence agencies, and Malcolm will back me up on this, I certainly hope. Maybe, maybe not.
Good luck
but
with
the
that.
intelligence agency said, while they did seek to interfere with the elections, it cannot be shown that they affected the election.
No. It didn't affect?
That's what the intelligence agency said.
No.
Jack. Malcolm, back me up on this.
Didn't affect?
No, they're saying that the results were not affected by it. The results were not affected. Listen, they didn't tell
hold on. That is such bullshit. They act like... Here's what happens. Here's what really gets me upset. No, because these talking points always act like we don't have eyes and we can't hear things. You know? That's what it acts like. No. I was there. I'm not a researcher. I was a witness. I saw the election happen.
Did you tell Hillary Clinton not to go to Wisconsin?
Hillary Clinton took her work home. That's what people were mad at.
So Larry Wilmore is obviously correct that the leaks that apparently were the result of Russian hacking did affect the way that some people voted. It did have an effect on the press coverage of our election. Whether it changed the outcome or not, who knows? But what former Republican Representative Jack Kingston said in that last clip about how the intelligence agency said there was no evidence it affected the election or it didn't affect the outcome, well, that's not what it says in the... I've actually put a link down in the video description to the actual declassified intelligence report, and here... This is the key paragraph there. We did not make an assessment of the impact that Russian activities had on the outcome of the 2016 election. The U.S. intelligence community is charged with monitoring and assessing the intentions, capabilities, and actions of foreign actors. It does not analyze U.S. political processes or U.S. public opinion. So, they didn't say it didn't affect the outcome. They said it was basically beyond the scope of their report. But like Larry Wilmore was saying, even though no one unfortunately brought up this point that contradicts what Jack Kingston said, but what Larry Wilmore was saying was anyone who has eyes and ears knows that those WikiLeaks items that apparently were the result of Russian hacking, that we're talking about basically internal emails from Hillary Clinton's campaign, that those, that was bad news for Hillary Clinton. It definitely hurt her. Though I think actually the James Comey thing hurt her even more. But to say that it didn't affect the election, maybe it didn't change the outcome, but that's not what the intelligence report said, and it's just this bogus talking point from the Republicans. I think Rush Limbaugh may make the same point. I don't know if I took that clip or if it's in the clip I took, but what is more disturbing, though, than that little bit of false information that Republicans always try to put out about whether Russia affected the election, is this next clip where Bill Maher actually seems to be advocating for the CIA deep state to overthrow the Trump administration, like we should be rooting for that. And I'm going to show that clip, and then actually a Glenn Greenwald clip and a Rush Limbaugh clip that also kind of talk about the deep state. But first, here's Bill Maher, I think not really realizing what he's advocating for. Maybe he does, but I don't agree, as I will discuss after we watch it here.
I mean, that's
America is now in this place where we have watched other countries who we had our nose up about, Egypt and Turkey, places where we thought, oh, the dictator is crazy, so the intelligence services, that's not really the best option. Oh, wait, it is the best option. They're like our last line of defense now. And Trump floated the idea this week that he's going to put this guy, Steven Feinberg, who's some hedge fund buddy of his. He wants him to oversee the intelligence. It looks like a purge in the making so that he can take over. My question to you, sir, can Trump put his people in charge of the intelligence agencies? Because then we have no line of defense between the total coup.
Well, every president puts people in charge of intelligence agencies, and they control that little seat that they're sitting in and maybe a couple of seats around them. The people who come in every day in, day out, who walk past the statue of Nathan Hale over at CIA, who walk past the Wall of Honor over at the National Security Agency, they are not in this in order that, the President of the United States goes out and disparages them day to day. They are here to protect this nation. They do it well. And what we're finding now is they are now in an act of self-defense for the nation. They are loyal to the Constitution, not the man.
Are you saying that they all got together and they said, hey, we're so worried about this guy that we're going to start breaking the law ourselves?
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
That's exactly what we're saying. Why do you think people who are in the Trump circle, the people that he trusted, are leaking? Why do you think that's happening?
And by the way, let me point this out.
Listen, let me
because they're saying, what the fuck is going on?
Let me point it out. I got to move on, but let me point this out first. The people in the intelligence agencies, by and large, are not liberals.
No.
They're not liberals. So when they're leaking, they're freaked out. Okay.
So that last thing Bill Maher said, I actually agree with, that the people in the deep state aren't liberals. But what Malcolm Nance said before, that they're there to protect the Constitution in the American way, and they're like some kind of superheroes, I don't really think that that's accurate. When I look at a fight between the Trump presidency and the deep state at the CIA, to me it's kind of like Alien versus Predator. Whoever wins, I think we're in big trouble. We don't want that kind of fight. And the best explanation for it, I think, comes from, maybe the originator of the term, the deep state, or at least the person who's really been popularizing it lately, which is Glenn Greenwald. He talked about this over in a Democracy Now! Interview. I put a link down to the full interview in the video description. This is also free on YouTube. This is about a little under 5 minutes from Glenn Greenwald explaining why liberals should not be, he doesn't like the Donald Trump presidency, but he doesn't want the CIA deep state, which does not have a history of being supporters of the Constitution, and like Bill Maher said at the end there, are not very liberal. Here's Glenn Greenwald's explanation, which I'll talk about after we watch it together here.
The deep state, although there's no precise or scientific definition, generally refers to the agencies in Washington that are permanent power factions. They stay and exercise power even as presidents who are elected come and go. They typically exercise their power in secret, in the dark, and so they're barely subject to democratic accountability if they're subject to it at all. It's agencies like the CIA, the NSA, and the other intelligence agencies that are essentially designed to disseminate disinformation and deceit and propaganda, and have a long history of doing not only that, but also have a long history of the world's worst war crimes, atrocities, and death squads. This is who not just people like Bill Kristol, but lots of Democrats are placing their faith in, are trying to empower, are cheering for, as they exert power separate and apart from, in fact, in opposition to, the political officials to whom they're supposed to be subordinate. And this is not just about Russia. You go all the way back to the campaign, and what you saw was that leading members of the intelligence community, including Mike Morell, who was the acting CIA chief under President Obama, and Michael Hayden, who ran both the CIA and the NSA under George W. Bush, were very outspoken supporters of Hillary Clinton. In fact, Michael Morell went to the New York Times and Michael Hayden went to the Washington Post during the campaign to praise Hillary Clinton and to say that Donald Trump had become a recruit of Russia. The CIA and the intelligence community were vehemently in support of Clinton and vehemently opposed to Trump from the beginning. And the reason was because they liked Hillary Clinton's policies better than they liked Donald Trump's. One of the main priorities of the CIA for the last 5 years has been a proxy war in Syria designed to achieve regime change with the Assad regime. Hillary Clinton was not only for that, she was critical of Obama for not allowing it to go further, and wanted to impose a no-fly zone in Syria and confront the Russians. Donald Trump took exactly the opposite view. He said, we shouldn't care who rules Syria. We should allow the Russians and even help the Russians kill ISIS and Al-Qaeda and other people in Syria. So Trump's agenda that he ran on was completely antithetical to what the CIA wanted. Clinton's was exactly what the CIA wanted, and so they were behind her. And so they've been trying to undermine Trump for many months throughout the election, and now that he won, they are not just undermining him with leaks, but actively subverting him. There's claims that they're withholding information from him on the grounds that they don't think he should have it and can be trusted with it. They are empowering themselves to enact policy. Now, I happen to think that the Trump presidency is extremely dangerous. You just listed off in your newscast that led the show many reasons. They want to dismantle the environment. They want to eliminate the safety net. They want to empower billionaires. They want to enact bigoted policies against Muslims and immigrants and so many others. And it is important to resist them. And there are lots of really great ways to resist them, such as getting courts to restrain them, citizen activism, and most important of all, having the Democratic Party engage in self-critique to ask itself how it can be a more effective political force in the United States after it has collapsed on all levels. That isn't what this resistance is now doing. What they're doing instead is trying to take maybe the only faction worse than Donald Trump, which is the deep state, the CIA, with its histories of atrocities, and say they ought to almost engage in like a soft coup where they take the elected president and prevent him from enacting his policies. And I think it is extremely dangerous to do that. Even if you're somebody who believes that both the CIA and the deep state on the one hand and the Trump presidency on the other are extremely dangerous, as I do, there's a huge difference between the two, which is that Trump was democratically elected and is subject to democratic controls, as these courts just demonstrated, as the media is showing, as citizens are proving. But on the other hand, the CIA was elected by nobody. They're barely subject to democratic controls at all. And so to urge that the CIA and the intelligence community empower itself to undermine the elected branches of government is insanity. That is a prescription for destroying democracy overnight in the name of saving it. And yet that's what so many, not just neocons, but the neocons' allies in the Democratic Party are now urging and cheering, and it's incredibly warped and dangerous to watch them do that.
So I agree with the analysis there of Glenn Greenwald 100% in terms of who we should be rooting for in this supposed battle between the deep state CIA and the Trump administration. I don't think we should be rooting for some sort of overthrow of Trump by the CIA, and I don't have faith in the CIA as liberal or as defenders of the Constitution or anything that Bill Maher was saying previously. The one thing I'm not sure about is whether what's going on actually is some sort of deep state CIA attack on the Trump administration. And some of the next clips I'm going to show put that into perspective, where, maybe what's going on is, just the regular kind of leaks that you always see in presidential administrations. It's not like some concerted effort by the CIA against Donald Trump. And by the way, I wanted to show, I've been reading your live comments along the way. Sorry that the audio and video are out of sync. Hopefully that'll be fixed by the time this is a recorded program, or I'll upload the recorded version. But I noticed along the way, Jungle Jim Ninja made this comment here. Maybe it's a blessing that Trump doesn't have a good relationship with the CIA. And I mean, there are a lot of checks on Trump, but I don't think that the deep state CIA should be the one who should be that check, despite what Jungle Jim Ninja said there. I agree more with what Glenn Greenwald said, that there are checks on the president, like the Congress and the courts, and he didn't mention the press, but I think the press is also a check on the presidency that's protected by the First Amendment. Those are all constitutional checks on the presidency. The CIA is, like I said, alien versus predator. Whoever wins, we're still going to get hurt. So that's not the kind of battle we want to see. Although this next clip I want to show, you'll see Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday bring up the deep state, but he and Rush Limbaugh seem to think that the deep state is like a liberal Obama conspiracy. That you'll see first Chris Wallace tries to attribute the deep state thing to Rush Limbaugh, who gives Glenn Greenwald credit, but then they totally change the argument, and it's like the deep state is some liberal conspiracy, and you'll see Rush Limbaugh lumps it in with the media and the courts, which are real constitutional checks, like I was just saying. And I'll talk about Rush Limbaugh and Chris Wallace's wrong-headed analysis after we watch that clip together here.
Use a phrase which I have to say that I only heard for the first time in the last couple of weeks, the deep state. And that's the notion that there's an Obama shadow government embedded in the bureaucracy that is working against this new president. I think some folks are going to think that's right on, and some folks will think it's awfully conspiratorial.
Well, I would love to claim credit for that, but actually I think a reporter by the name of Glenn Greenwald at The Intercept, who has got a relationship with, what's his name, Assange, I think he actually coined the term, and I think it works. I don't think who's driving this business that the Russians hacked the election? It's the Democrat Party. It's Hillary. It's Obama. It's all those people who just can't accept that
and
they
you think
lost.
They're behind the leaks too?
Absolutely. Of course they are. They're trying. Look, they can't win at the ballot box. You know they're down 1,200 seats since 2010. They've become a marginal party electorally. All they've got is their embeds in the bureaucracy and the judiciary, and they're pulling out all the stops. There's no question. This business that the Russians hacked the election, this is serious allegation that is impossible. The Russians could not have had any impact whatsoever on voting, either how they were cast or how they were counted. In fact, if you want to say they did their job. Hillary won the popular vote. How could they have possibly had this whole premise? And it's been driving news coverage here ever since Trump took office and even before. And you don't need any more evidence than that to suggest and to know that the left, which is run by Obama and Hillary and the hierarchy of the Democrat Party, is doing everything they can to undermine, to sabotage, and to prevent Trump from implementing his agenda. There's no question about it. I know what Trump should do.
Well, I'm going to get to that in a second.
So that's the only clip I'm going to show of Rush Limbaugh. If you want to see the whole thing, there's a link down in the video description to the entire Fox News Sunday program. You can listen to... I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh a lot when I was driving, when I used to drive during his show, and I think I've listened to enough of Rush Limbaugh's analysis to last me a lifetime, although the ideology of Rush Limbaugh and the ideology of our current president are not all that different, as you kind of saw in that clip. But he also made that same bogus talking point about how, because Russia couldn't have changed the actual vote tallies, that means they didn't affect our elections, when the dissemination of hacked materials from the DNC and from John Podesta, that news did affect how some people saw the election. I mean, whether it changed the outcome, you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But I also wanted to, having shown that kind of softball analysis from Chris Wallace talking to Rush Limbaugh, where they don't even really get what the deep state is, that it's actually this, I think, more conservative than liberal. It's definitely neocon. If anything, it's it's the CIA intelligence apparatus that wants to keep power, whoever, it's not Obama, it's not George W. Bush. It's been there for a really long time. Its biggest counterweight, at least in the current administration, I think might be the FBI, which leans more towards Trump, and the CIA leans more against Trump, as some of the things I've been reading. But, I mean, who really knows? It's all based on these sources that we don't know who they are, and so it's very difficult for those of us out here in the people who aren't in the government and don't have security clearances, and maybe historians will let us know in another 20 or 30 or 40 years. But anyway, I want to move on to this next clip from Fox News Sunday. I just criticized Chris Wallace for being kind of softball and inaccurate in terms of his description of the deep state in the last clip, but he actually was really tough on Reince Priebus in a couple clips. I'm showing this one out of order because he was especially tough on Reince Priebus on Donald Trump's attack on the press, calling the press, the enemy of the American people. And I have that entire 7-minute back and forth between Reince Priebus and Chris Wallace in a few minutes when I get to the Trump versus the press topic. But this is actually where he talks or asks Reince Priebus about National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and whether he broke the law. And you'll see Reince Priebus say that Chris Wallace is going bananas, and I think he says that because this clip comes after that previous 7-minute clip that I'll show later. Like I said, they're in reverse time order, but that's because of the order of my topics. Here's Chris Wallace being acting like a tough journalist, I have to say, in his cross-examination of Reince Priebus, talking about Michael Flynn over here.
The question about Russia, which you'll be delighted to answer. In his news conference this week, President Trump defended former National Security Advisor, now former, retired General Michael Flynn, in his phone call with the Russian ambassador. Here's the president.
Mike was doing his job. He was calling countries and his counterparts. So it certainly would have been okay with me if he did it. I would have directed him to do it if I thought he wasn't doing it.
I want to be precise here. The president doesn't think there's anything wrong with his pick, he wasn't then in office, for National Security Advisor calling the Russian ambassador to talk about, we're going to review and perhaps lift sanctions precisely on the day that President Obama imposed those sanctions because Russia had interfered in the U.S. election. He doesn't think there's anything wrong with that?
Well, I don't think there's anything, our legal department looked at this too. I don't think there's anything wrong with the subject of sanctions or new sanctions coming up. I don't think that that in and of itself is wrong, and I think that's what the president is saying.
I'm talking specifically about this phone call at this time. You've got,
the legal department
President Obama, who is so outraged.
I don't know why you're so
No, because
here. I mean, it's fine that you're so going bananas here, Chris. Look,
I'm not going bananas. I'm asking you about the fact that it seems odd that the President of the United States, then Barack Obama, imposes sanctions because he says that Russia had interfered with, undermined our election, and you've got Mike Flynn calling the Russian ambassador and saying, well, don't worry about it, we'll review the sanctions. And you don't think there's anything wrong with that?
Well, you don't know he said that. What the president is saying is that if the subject of the new sanctions came up, that in of itself is not a problem. I mean, you know, how does, when you have a national security advisor that's calling 30 different leaders a day, there are a lot of topics of the day that come up. What are these people supposed to do?
Well, why did the acting Attorney General, Sally Yates, warn the White House counsel, Don McGahn? And why was it called to a meeting and you were met with Bannon and the president? Why did all of that happen? Obviously, there was something troubling
in
that
happen?
conversation.
It happened because Sally Yates alerted and gave a heads up. It was later determined that there was no investigation ongoing. We looked at the matter. The legal department determined that there was nothing illegal that happened in the conversation, but then the issue turned to whether or not Michael Flynn was being honest and direct with the vice president, and ultimately the president determined that it was an unsustainable situation, and he fired, or he asked for the resignation of Mike Flynn. I mean,
Reince, let me
that's
ask,
what happened, and
let
that's
me ask you about
at.
that timeline, if I might.
So yeah, you can see he's Reince Priebus calling the Fox News host bananas for the way he's going. He's getting too excited about whether the National Security Advisor broke the law. I talked last week a little bit about the Logan Act. I even made a joke about that, and I'm not sure the Logan Act is even prosecutable. That's not the concern, although apparently Michael Flynn may have lied to the FBI, and that's a felony. That's like where they get you, kind of like Scooter Libby back, the Dick Cheney's chief of staff, who they tried to go after Dick Cheney and Scooter Libby for outing Valerie Plame, the CIA agent, and they couldn't actually get them for any of the underlying crimes, but they got Scooter Libby for lying to the FBI. That's why, I think that's why they say the cover-up is worse than the crime, because those other crimes can be very difficult, like the Logan Act can be very difficult to prosecute. But if Michael Flynn actually lied to the FBI about what he said in that phone call, and now there's a transcript that contradicts what he said to the FBI, they should prosecute him, but it may be ultimately up to Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, Jeff Sessions, the new Attorney General. So maybe there won't be a prosecution. But I showed that clip from the Fox News Sunday cross-examination of Reince Priebus, and there's an even stronger one, like I said, when I get to the Trump versus the press topic. But I want to show a couple clips of NBC's Meet the Press, Chuck Todd, his cross-examination of Reince Priebus, which I also thought was really informative on this Trump versus Russia topic. And the first clip here is Reince Priebus talking about basically that same issue. And I think Chuck Todd does a good job of nailing down Reince Priebus using a clip of what he said himself on the air, where he he was responsible for disseminating false information based on, false information he got from the director of the NSA, Michael Flynn, assuming they weren't all in on it, which is another question maybe I'll talk about after we watch that clip together from NBC's Meet the Press this morning here.
The issue of Mike Flynn and the conversations, what was said or not said with the Russian ambassador. You were on this program just before the inauguration, and here's what you told viewers at the time.
I have talked to General Flynn. None of that came up. The subject matter of sanctions or the actions taken by the Obama administration did not come up in the conversation. And
so there was no challenge of American policy currently by Mr. Flynn with the Russian ambassador. Obviously, now we know that was not true. You clearly were misled. Walk me through this. When did you know you had been misled?
Sometime after January 27th, it was our legal counsel got a heads up from Sally Yates that something wasn't adding up with his story, and so then our legal department went into a review of the situation, and sometime after that, when Sally Yates refused to do her job as Attorney General, like 2 days later, we had to get rid of her. And then sometime after that, the legal department came back and said that they didn't see anything wrong with what was actually said, but then we started thinking about whether or not Michael Flynn was being straight with us, and that's when we started asking a lot of questions and sort of deposing Michael Flynn and figuring out what he knew or what he didn't know. He maintained the fact that he never talked to the Russian ambassador about sanctions, but still something wasn't adding up. And eventually, we determined that he did, in fact, talk about the sanctions, even though we didn't believe that it was illegal. The fact was it turned more or less into a conversation about whether or not he was being honest with us and the vice president, and the president asked for his resignation, and we got it.
Did you read those transcripts yourself?
I can't answer that question, but I can assure you that I am fully aware of the situation, and we determined that he wasn't being straight with the vice president and others, and that's why we asked for his resignation.
Why was...
I thought that was kind of interesting at the end there, where Reince Priebus wouldn't say whether he'd read the transcript, and I'm not sure why he said he can't answer that question. Maybe... I don't know, maybe the existence of that kind of wiretapping is supposedly classified, but, I mean, the president can declassify anything he wants, and Reince Priebus, as the chief of staff, is pretty much, I mean, he's almost functionally the president. He has gets to use a lot of the presidential powers, and, I mean, all he has to do is get Trump to approve it, and he can declassify anything, so he could answer that question, I suppose, but I guess he doesn't really want to answer what it says on that transcript of what our intelligence agencies picked up of the conversation between National Security Advisor, incoming National Security Advisor Michael Flynn at that point, and the Russian ambassador. By the way, last week I said it was the Russian foreign minister. It was actually the Russian ambassador, so that was a mistake I made last week. Sorry about that. But I want to show this second clip from NBC's Meet the Press, where Chuck Todd also was asking... oh, and by the way, did you notice in the middle there, Reince Priebus, he said some... Well, whatever. I actually want to get on to the next clip, where Reince Priebus is asked by Chuck Todd if there was any contact between the Trump campaign and anyone in Russia, which, he says that there wasn't, to the best of his knowledge, which is kind of like the what the Trump administration says. And then he goes into this big, long attack on the New York Times, which is, I think that's the last Reince Priebus clip I'm going to show before I get to the press topic. But anyway, here's that Reince Priebus clip from NBC's Meet the Press this morning here.
the issue of Mike Flynn and the conversations, what was said or not said with the Russian ambassador. You were on this program just before the inauguration, and here's what...
See, I finally showed the wrong clip. That was the clip I just showed. Here's the one where Reince Priebus talks about other people in the Trump campaign and the attack on the New York Times here.
On the issue of Russia. The president never seemed to answer the question that was asked 3 or 4 times there, which is, does he know for sure that anybody on his campaign, can he say definitively that nobody in his campaign, nobody that he's been associated with, had any contacts with any Russian agents?
No, first of all, the answer is no, and we don't know of any contacts with Russian agents, and that gets to that New York Times story, Chuck. I mean, we've spent days talking about a story that says that our campaign had constant contacts with Russian spies, and I can tell you, I've talked to the top levels of the intelligence community, and they've assured me that that New York Times story was grossly overstated and inaccurate and totally wrong. I know what the intelligence committees in the House and the Senate were told by the FBI, and I know what I was told, and what I will tell you is that story was total baloney. And in fact, Devin Nunes, who is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, went on the record after he was informed by the FBI as to that story, and what did he say? He said it was total garbage. This is what we're talking about, Chuck. It's not all media. It's not everyone involved in the media. It is this sort of fake news stuff that is enormously important. That when you get a front page story of the New York Times without a single source on the record saying that your campaign had constant contacts. They didn't say 1 contact. They didn't say 2 contacts. It doesn't matter. We have not been informed of even that. But to say constant contact, then the next day, Chuck, the Wall Street Journal comes out and says that the President of the United States is being cut out of information by the intelligence community. Then later in the day, all of the main departments of the intelligence community says, that's not true. This is what we're dealing with. While we're putting in a lobbying ban, while we're freezing federal government employees, while we're getting the economy back on track, we're sitting here talking about these stories, or whether Steve Bannon and I get along or not, which we do. I can assure you people in Kenosha, Wisconsin aren't worried about that. They want to see jobs and money back in their pocket, and that's what I'm trying to do, and we're trying to do every day, Chuck.
The Associated Press...
So, yeah, that was... I don't know, that answer there, it doesn't really make me feel any better. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And you notice he talked about what Devin Nunes said. I'm actually going to have a clip of Devin Nunes in just a moment. I'm going to show 3 different members of Congress reacting to this whole Trump versus Russia topic. Though the first one I want to show is from CNN's State of the Union, where this is, I think, the only clip I'm taking. Jake Tapper wasn't even there this week. It was guest host Jim Sciutto, and again, they did not have any representatives from the Trump administration. Reince Priebus actually went on 3 shows. He didn't go on ABC's This Week, and he didn't go on CNN's State of the Union. And by the way, in that last clip you saw, Reince Priebus was pivoting to the attack on the press, and I'm going to show his attack on the press from all 3 of the networks he went on, from CBS, from Fox News, and from NBC's Meet the Press. But before I get to that topic, I have 3 more clips to show on the Russia topic. These are 3 different members of Congress showing how they're going to react. The first one is kind of a dumb question from Jim Sciutto on CNN's State of the Union, where he's asking, first he does an intro where he talks about how FBI Director James Comey went and talked to the Senate Intelligence Committee, presumably about what Michael Flynn did with the Russians. And then he asked Senator Bob Menendez, who's on the Foreign Relations Committee, do you know anything about what he said? And his answer is, no, I don't. So why are you a guest on the show? Well, he does give sort of the Democratic talking points on what they want to happen after that, which I will discuss after we watch that clip together over here.
For Jake Tapper, 5 congressional committees are now investigating whether President Trump's campaign had ties to Russia. But the most serious seems to be the one underway by the Senate Intelligence Committee. The director, of the FBI, James Comey, gave its members a classified briefing on Friday from which the senators emerged serious and tight-lipped. So what new information has the Senate learned? I'm joined now by Democratic Senator of New Jersey. He is Robert Menendez. Senator Menendez, thanks very much for joining us this Sunday.
Good to be with you, Jim.
After that meeting, Senator Marco Rubio tweeted the following. He said, "I am now very confident Senate Intel Committee I serve on will conduct thorough bipartisan investigation of Putin interference and influence." Have you spoken to any members of the Intelligence Committee about what new they learned from Director Comey?
No, I have not. But I think they're pursuing a vigorous effort to get to the bottom of it. The only question for me is the Intelligence Committee in and of itself alone the appropriate entity, particularly since much of what they'll do will be in secret. And I think there are elements of the whole Russia scandal that deserve to be in the public view.
This is a question here because there are so many politics, as you would expect, around this. Some Democrats concerned that even a bipartisan committee would not be aggressive enough. From your point of view, do you think there needs to be an independent commission, something along the lines of the 9/11 Commission?
I think the question of Russia trying to undermine our democracy, a direct attack by cyber, is something that rises to that importance. It's a new world, and we have to be prepared for it, and we have to know what was involved in the process, not only of that, but what happened in the aftermath. We have a national security apparatus that is stuck and mired in the muck of Russian connections. We have a set of circumstances where Russia is engaged in trying to do this in elections in Western allies this year, in France and Germany. And so it seems to me that knowing the who, when, what, and everything that transpired deserves an independent commission. Now, I know my colleagues are going to work at it really hard. I don't question their commitment, but there are so many different elements of this. Foreign relations, where I sit on, could be looking at Russian foreign policy vis-a-vis Russia and the effects that it has in this regard. You could be looking at it from an intelligence angle. You could be looking at it from the judiciary angle as it relates to the election process in this country and how Russia tried to affect it. Instead of having disparate elements, a commission that is committed ultimately, I think, would be the greatest course. In the absence of being able to create one, because I think those calls have been rebuffed by the Republican leadership in both the House and the Senate, then we need to vigorously pursue it through each and every one of these avenues.
Russia, ties to Russia.
So that's Senator Bob Menendez, Democrat from New Jersey, explaining why Democrats want an independent investigation, some sort of investigation similar to the 9/11 Commission on this whole Russia influence on our elections. It's a cyber attack on our country, like 9/11 was a terrorist attack, and it deserves, it goes across several different subject matter areas that different committees would cover. So, it seems like it would make sense to have that type of investigation, but you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But also, like I said before I showed the clip, I think it was kind of a stupid question at the beginning that Jim Sciutto asked Bob Menendez about, what happened in that Senate Intelligence Committee meeting when he's not on the Senate Intelligence Committee and it's all really super secret, so he doesn't know what happened. But at least he's in the Senate. You see the same question asked of Adam Schiff over on CBS. Oh, I'm sorry. This is Adam Schiff on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos with the guest host Jonathan Karl. He isn't in the Senate, but he's actually the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, so he should, even though he wasn't in that specific meeting where Comey briefed the Senate Intel Committee, he may have some insight. And here I think he makes sort of a middle ground argument about what's going on with the Intelligence Committee, but it's not like a deep state coup against the Trump administration. It's just like things that we should be worried about because Russia has been doing, it's kind of what Bob Menendez was saying there, that Russia's been trying to attack elections in a lot of different countries. And anyway, Adam Schiff makes that same point talking to Jonathan Karl on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning, which we will discuss after we watch it together here.
Excuse me, come in this way. Director Comey, we're here to discuss General Flynn.
There's FBI Director James Comey leaving the Capitol Friday after spending more than 2 hours briefing the Senate Intelligence Committee behind closed doors, ignoring a question on if he was there to brief the senators on Michael Flynn. And we are joined now by Congressman Adam Schiff, the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman Schiff, thank you for joining us.
You bet.
So I want to get to the Intelligence Committee's investigation into the Russian interference in the elections. But first, a more immediate issue. The president has denounced ongoing leaks. He thinks they're coming from the intelligence community. But I want to ask you, doesn't he have a point? I mean, we have a situation now where the president holds calls with foreign leaders, and not long after, the details of those calls are there to be read by everybody in the newspapers. Aren't you concerned about these leaks?
Oh, I am concerned about leaks, whether it's on the phone calls or leaks pertaining to any investigation into Russian activities in the United States or the Flynn investigation. So yes, there is a point. At the same time, two things concern me. The first is that he turned these leaks, this problem with leaks, into attack on his enemies. He is now describing the press in terms that we've never heard, at least not since Nixon, and probably not even in terms that Nixon would subscribe to. That is deeply concerning, that he is essentially using this to go after his enemies. But more broadly than that, we cannot lose sight of what's really at stake here, and that is that Russia is leading a movement around the world to spread autocracy and authoritarianism. They're interfering, obviously, in our elections, but in the elections here in Europe. Here in Munich, there is deep concern about Russia's new bellicosity and the fact that they need a strong America to push back. And they need to be reassured of that. And when the president focuses on a fight with the press or investigating leaks, but doesn't seem committed to standing up to what Russia is doing at home and around the world, that is of profound concern.
But is it your sense that there are elements of the intelligence community that, frankly, are out to get the president? I mean, he clearly thinks so.
No, I don't have that understanding at all. The intelligence community is very professional. They do their jobs well. They're the best intelligence gatherers in the world. They're dedicated, patriotic Americans. They will work with any president. They want to have a good relationship with every president. And I think these broadsides against the intelligence community are deeply counterproductive. They hurt morale and also make it difficult for frankly, our agents to do their jobs, our officers to do their jobs and get out and recruit people around the world because they're asking people to put their lives on the line. And how can they do that if they don't believe the President of the United States is going to value the work product that comes out of those risks?
You've called for General Flynn to testify before.
So there you see Representative Adam Schiff on ABC's This Week kind of defending the leaks from, well, he's not really defending the leaks, but he's defending the CIA rank-and-file officers and saying that there's no deep state coup against the Trump administration. And I think he also makes a good case as to why we have to fear some of the things Russia's been doing, not just in the U.S. election, but around the world, trying to promote authoritarian values and whatever else has been going on with Russia and the presidential election in the United States. I think that's at least one thing to look at. And before I leave the subject of Russia's interference in the Trump administration or what's going on there, I want to show that, that was Adam Schiff, the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Well, the actual chair of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, he was over on CBS's Face the Nation, and he was much more critical of the leaks and attacking the people who were doing the leaks, although I don't think he was really subscribing to the whole deep state coup theory either, as I will discuss after we watch his answers to the questions that John Dickerson asked about that on CBS's Face the Nation this morning here.
Committee, Devin Nunes. Mr. Chairman, I want to start with these leaks that President Trump has been so angry about, coming from all kinds of different places. Help people understand the difference between a leak that is just kind of something an administration doesn't want to see and a leak that is illegal or would be the subject of investigation, as you've asked the FBI to investigate.
Well, there's three very specific leaks that I have a big problem with. One is the transcript with the discussion that Donald Trump had with the Mexican president. 2 is the conversation that he had with the Australian Prime Minister. And then, of course, 3 is the leaking of Mike Flynn's name to the press shortly after the first of the year. These are all against the law. And you can't operate a government like this if you can't even have the President of the United States or his National Security Advisor able to have conversations in private with foreign leaders.
Explain on Mike Flynn. People have heard his name so much in this conversation or conversations he had with the Russian ambassador. Give us a little more detail on why that bothers you.
Well, if this was picked up as incidental collection because perhaps they had a warrant on someone else, typically an American citizen wouldn't be unmasked. Somebody decided to unmask that name, somebody within the either Department of Justice or others within the administration. If that happened, why did that happen? What would be the purpose of unmasking an American citizen's name? In this case, at the time, he was a private citizen. So if his name was unmasked, somebody made that decision, and we need to know who made that decision. Did they really use a 1799 law called the Logan Act as the reason for unmasking his name? If that's the case, we have bigger problems in this country than what we really even realize.
Why do you think these leaks, the one you just described and others, where do you think they're coming from and why?
Well, I mean, this is why I think that the FBI and others need to investigate this, because the number of people that would actually have known that Mike Flynn, General Flynn, who was the National Security Advisor designee, was having conversations with the Russians had to be very, very small number. And it had to be the highest, at the highest levels of the Obama administration.
And Mr. Chairman, what do you think does that say anything about the relationship between the intelligence communities, where this leak may have and other leaks may have come from, and President Trump?
Well, let's get straight what we're talking about with the intelligence agencies, because I think there's a lot of innuendo out there that the intelligence agencies have a problem with Donald Trump. The rank and file people that are out doing jobs across the world, very difficult places, they don't pay attention to what's going on in Washington. What we have is we do have people in the last administration, people who have burrowed in, perhaps all throughout the government, who clearly are leaking to the press. And it is against the law. Major laws have been broken. If you believe the Washington Post story that said there were 9 people who said this, well, these are 9 people who broke the law.
All right, Mr. Chairman, we're going to take a break.
So there you see the Republican chair of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, talking on CBS's Face the Nation, where the one thing he seems to agree on with Representative Adam Schiff, the ranking Democrat on that same committee, is that there is not a deep state coup going on against Donald Trump, that there's not a fight between the CIA and Donald Trump. You can let me know down in the comment section if you think that's actually going on. But he, of course, had a very different take, and he really wants to go against those leakers. And I mean, the people who leaked the transcript, or that there was a transcript, or that Michael Flynn was involved in this conversation with the Russian ambassador, I mean, that is classified information. But I don't know, the transcript of his conversation with Mexico, or what happened when he talked to the president of Mexico, I guess that's classified. That's not quite as classified as wiretapping of the Russian ambassador. But like I said, that's the last clip I want to show on the whole topic of Russian infiltration into the U.S. election and the Russian connection to the Trump administration. There's a lot more of it in the Sunday morning shows if you want to watch the full shows at a link I put in the video description there. By the way, last week I noticed a lot of people were asking, what about Sandy? Well, my dog Sandy is showing up for the show. Here, I just took a picture of Sandy showing up. I don't know, do you think Sandy seems concerned about Russian hacking? Maybe, but I think Sandy's more concerned about the attacks on the press, about Donald Trump saying that the press and the media are the enemy of the American people. In his tweet, he mentioned, I always talk about the big 5 corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News. Well, except for Fox News, he mentioned the other 4. So, and of course, the failing New York Times. And I thought Fox News was a little bit soft on the way they reported on this in their news intro on the subject. I'm going to show Chris Wallace giving that brief, like 30-second report on how Donald Trump is punching back like it's really the press's fault and he's just reacting, which I don't think is really accurate. But then, like I said, after that, I'm going to show this 7-minute interaction between Chris Wallace and Reince Priebus, where he really goes after him for Trump's tweet about the press being the enemy of the American people. But first, here's kind of the softer version of that in the introduction from Chris Wallace over here.
President Trump is punching back against critics, especially in the media, who say after just 30 days in office, his administration has gone off the tracks. He made his case this week in an extraordinary news conference, and then yesterday afternoon in Florida in a campaign-style rally.
We are here today to speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I hear your demands, I hear your voices, and I promise you I will deliver. I promise that.
Joining us now from Mr. Trump's Mar-a-Lago.
So, yeah, that introduction I don't think really covered the craziness going on with Trump and his attack on the media and the press. And I was all ready to, when I first saw the beginning of Fox News Sunday and then that introduction from Chris Wallace, I was all ready to say that Fox News was going all soft on Donald Trump, even though he was attacking the media. But I already showed one clip where Reince Priebus was calling Chris Wallace bananas for the way he was all hot and attacking the Trump administration. And if you want to understand why he said that, you have to watch this clip, which came right before that. It's, like I said, 7 minutes long, and Chris Wallace is as confrontational a journalist as you could hope for, even though he's on Fox News talking to Reince Priebus about this attack on the press. There's a little bit about the Russian hacking. That's the thing, is that the Russian hacking comes into the press story just like the press story was in some of those Russian hacking clips I already showed. Well, here is sort of both those topics coming together in this long interaction between Chris Wallace and Reince Priebus this morning that I'll talk about after we watch it together here.
Start with President Trump's tweet on Friday afternoon. This is what he wrote. The fake news media, failing New York Times, NBC News, ABC, CBS, CNN, is not my enemy. It is the enemy of the American people. Reince, the president believes that a free and independent press is a threat to the country?
No, I think for the most part, and I understand where he's coming from, is that there are certain things that are happening in the news that just aren't honest. And we're not talking about everyone, Chris. We're not talking about all news. But we're talking about something that I guess he's termed as fake news. Let me give you an example. First of all, the New York Times last week put out an article with no direct sources that said that the Trump campaign had constant contacts with Russian spies. Basically, some treasonous type accusations. We have now all kinds of people looking into this. I can assure you, and I've been approved to say this, that the top levels of the intelligence community have assured me that that story is not only inaccurate, but it's grossly overstated, and it was wrong, and there's nothing to it. And so if I can say that to the American people, then what does it say about the story? The next day, Chris, the Wall Street Journal puts out a story that says that they have anonymous sources that say that the intelligence community is purposely cutting out material from President Trump's briefing materials that he gets every day. That then proved to be untrue. All the agencies put out a statement saying it was totally inaccurate. Then we get thrown off the rails for 3 days responding to this stuff.
I get the fact that you don't like, Chris? I get the fact that you don't like some stories. First of all, you made some news there at the top, and I want to follow up on that. You say, because you've said before you weren't part of the campaign, so you couldn't speak to that. You say that the intelligence community says that there were no contacts between anyone in the Trump campaign, any associate of Mr. Trump, and anybody involved as a Russian agent as to the campaign and collusion in the campaign with Russia. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they told me, absolutely. They have made it very clear that that story in the New York Times is complete garbage. And quite frankly, they used different words than that, okay?
Who was it that said that?
And when I read back,
who was it that
I'm not going to tell you.
Well, wait a minute.
Can't tell you that.
Wait a minute, Reince. You're just complained about unnamed sources. You're using an unnamed source.
Well, because I didn't ask for approval to use their name, but I will tell you this. When I say top-level people, I mean top-level people, okay?
So no collusion whatsoever between anybody involved with Trump and anybody involved with Russia in the 2016 campaign?
No. And if you look at Devin Nunes's comments in the actual paper on the record,
Chairman of the House
Chris,
Intelligence Committee.
He was briefed by the FBI, and what did he do? He turned around and went on the record and said that this story is complete garbage.
Okay, but here's the problem.
So here we are.
Reince, wait a minute. Here's the problem. I don't have any problem with you complaining about an individual story. We sometimes get it wrong. You guys sometimes get it wrong. I don't have any problem with you complaining about bias, but you went a lot further than that, or the president went a lot further than that. He said that the fake media, not certain stories, the fake media are an enemy to the country. We don't have a state-run media in this country. That's what they have in dictatorships.
Okay, listen, Chris. It's not just two stories. Then it's followed up by 24 hours a day, 7 days a week of other cable stations, not necessarily Fox, that all day long on every chyron, every 7 minutes are talking about Russian spies, talking about the intelligence community, talking about how me and Steve Bannon don't like each other and what's Kellyanne doing. All this just total garbage, unsourced stuff. Listen, there's nothing wrong with background. Reporters need background information. We need to communicate with reporters and give reporters context. All I'm saying, though, is if you're going to come out with this, if you're going to come out with this story that says Russian spies are talking to your campaign, my God. I mean, you actually, I think you should, in some cases, or in most cases, actually have a named source. Look what we've done. We've repealed TPP. We have signed a coal bill to save the coal industry. We named Neil Gorsuch. We put an executive order in to deregulate the federal government.
All of that.
There's so many things I can talk about.
Wait a minute. We and all of the other cable channels had covered live the announcement of Neil Gorsuch and covered live a lot of these other events. Covered live for an hour and 15 minutes.
Hiring freeze,
the president's news conference. Here's the problem: when the president says that we're the enemy of the American people, it makes it sound like if you're going against him, you're going against the country.
Here's the problem, Chris. The problem is that you're right. Some of these things were covered. But you get about 10% coverage on the fact you did a very successful meeting with Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of the UK, the Prime Minister of Canada.
We covered all of those news conferences live. Everybody did.
Right, sure. Yeah, right. But then as soon as it was over, the next 20 hours is all about Russian spies.
But you don't get to tell us what to do, right?
Nothing's happening.
You don't get to tell us what to do any more than Barack Obama did. Barack Obama whined about Fox News all the time, but I got to say, he never said that we were an enemy of the people.
Let me tell you something. He said a lot of things about Fox News, Chris. I think you ought to go check the tape. He blamed you for a lot of things, and I'm surprised as someone from Fox that you would forget all the shots that he took.
No, he took
Fox
the shots,
News.
and we didn't like him. And frankly, we don't like this either, because but he never went as far as President Trump has, and that's what's concerning, because it seems like he crosses a line when he talks about that we're an enemy of the people. That is concerning.
I think you should be concerned. I think you should be concerned about mainstream news outlets that are acting like, Washington Daily gossip magazines instead of the way it used to be, where you'd get a few sources on the record. Yeah, you'll need some background, and maybe, yes, you'll need some anonymous sources. But to accuse an organization of being in constant contact with Russian spies is outrageous. And every day it's something different. It's some other source that is absolutely untrue. Instead of talking about the things that are going on.
All right, can I ask you about
we are doing every
So, as most of you probably know, I've been a big critic of Fox News. I have a Fox News bias playlist going back to my earliest days on YouTube, like 10 years, in the past where I have over 200 videos showing Fox News bias. Several of those actually involve Chris Wallace, and I've been critical of him when I think that he's not been a strong enough journalist on several issues where he, carried water for Fox News, which is really an arm of the Republican Party, like the communications arm of the Republican Party, and they haven't really been that critical of Donald Trump. But I think in that particular segment, that 7-minute long confrontation between Chris Wallace and Reince Priebus, the chief of staff for Donald Trump, I think Chris Wallace did a very good job journalistically, and he was even specially situated to make that argument because Reince Priebus was all loaded up to say, well, President Obama attacked Fox News, but Chris Wallace is on Fox News. He knows those attacks. He complained about those attacks, but what President Obama complained about is nowhere near saying the media, the big four corporate outlets, not including Fox News, they are the enemy of the American people. That is goes to the level almost of what a dictator might say, which is what you'll see in a clip I have from John McCain in a few minutes, where he says that's what authoritarians say before they shut down the press. But before I get to that, I have two more Reince Priebus clips. I wanted to show how he tried to defend what Donald Trump said in that tweet on all three of the networks he went on. It's kind of interesting that I think Fox News was the one that called him on it the most and was most critical. That was 7 minutes long. Like I said, this is about half as long. It's from CBS's Face the Nation, and you'll see here Reince Priebus is he's really defensive, and he is really questioning, or he won't accept the question from John Dickerson about how people on Capitol Hill, Republicans, are worried about Donald Trump saying that his administration is running like a finely tuned machine when there are all these problems. And Reince Priebus won't even accept the premise and says, who are your unnamed sources? This is exactly what I'm talking about. And it's actually not that confrontational a question from John Dickerson. I think it just shows how prickly Reince Priebus is on this topic, and how the Trump administration is ready to attack the press on a moment's notice when there's not even really any grounds to do so. And by the end of this question, Reince Priebus is answering the question he wouldn't answer at the beginning, as I will discuss with you after we watch that CBS clip from this morning here.
Committee, Devin Nunes. Mr. Chairman, I want to start with these leaks that President Trump has been so...
Oh, sorry, wrong CBS clip. Wrong clip. Happens. But here's the actual CBS clip from this morning here.
The litany
you
many
have
times with you.
Let me ask you about that litany. In conversations I've had with members in the administration and also Republicans on the Hill, they have said that while they're on your team, they're on your side, they recognize all those accomplishments you talk about, that when the president says the White House is a fine-tuned machine, and when Stephen Miller in the White House says it's an understatement that you're in control, what they worry about is that not everything is in control. And there's such an effort to show how things are in control that there may be a blind spot at the White House of the things that, naturally, with any administration, need to be fixed. For those people who are worried about that blind spot, about the things that do need to be fixed, what's your words to them?
Well, first of all, there you go again. You're talking about some people, those people, them, they. Who are these people, John?
You've not heard any. You've not heard any.
I mean, the fact of the matter is, no, but you're asking me a question about.
You have lots of conversations with people on the Hill.
This is what you guys do.
Well, let me ask you then. Let's put it this way, Mr. Priebus. In conversations you've had with the Hill, on conversations you have with, say, Speaker Paul Ryan and lots of other leaders on the Hill, when they talk to you, do they express no concern that things at the White House are maybe a little ragged on certain issues? Is it constant praise that you get from your allies on the Hill?
Look, I think what we hear from people on the Hill is the same thing I'm telling you, is that the media is obsessed with a lot of false, hollow stories without sourcing that we have to track down and deal with. You have,
Let me ask you.
You have constant.
Let me ask you this, Mr.
Go
Priebus.
ahead.
So in every answer, you've turned it back to the media. So I guess the question is the strategy now to answer any question by just turning it back on the media and using a fight with the media as a way to try to control the storyline?
John, the last few questions you've asked make no sense. I mean, you're talking about people that you're not naming and whether or not some things need to be improved. And what would you say to people that say some things? I mean, what things, what people, what are you referring to? Give me a specific question with a specific purpose, with a specific accusation, and I'll answer the question. But you're asking me a vague question without any specifics, and you want me to give you a specific answer.
Well,
it's ridiculous.
I guess the president was the one who said the administration is running like a fine-tuned machine. So I'm referring to a comment that he made, and people I talked to on the Hill don't agree with that comment. And so I'm wondering whether you think that there is a disconnect there, and whether you have to address that with your allies who, again, have your interests at heart, but think there are parts of the administration, and what your evaluation as the person who's the chief of staff is in terms of improvements you have to make in the administration.
Well, look, I mean, I think for one thing, it is a finely tuned machine, but I also think that it's a machine that is the longest administration without a full cabinet. And as those cabinet positions are being filled, the positions underneath those cabinet secretaries are being filled. And I do think that things get more robust and they become more built out as you move forward. And I think all those things are going to help the entire Trump administration. But as far as what we've done on a daily basis, whether it's meeting with retailers, whether it's talking about women empowerment, whether it's meeting with foreign leaders, or whether it's signing an EO or saving the coal industry, those are things that we're doing day in and day out. And I think that the media, and not necessarily you, John, but people like you ought to spend more time on the actual substance of what's happening as opposed to hollow stories about what might be happening out there across the world, which is not based on any fact or any actual specific information.
Well, I was just asking for a response to something the president said, but let me...
Yeah, John Dickerson seemed like he was surprised that Reince Priebus was so prickly. You know, one thing I don't know is what order these interviews were given. I know that interview on CBS's Face the Nation happened sometime yesterday, Saturday, because they uploaded the CBS Face the Nation channel uploaded clips from it on Saturday night, so I know it was done at least like 12 to 24 hours beforehand. I don't know if he'd already gone through that whole thing with Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday before the interview I showed on CBS's Face the Nation, but he seemed really defensive when John Dickerson wasn't really all that confrontational, I didn't think. But before I finish with the Reince Priebus clips, like I said, he was on 3 different networks. The last clip I want to show is from NBC's Meet the Press, where I actually think Reince Priebus, or where I think Chuck Todd was the least confrontational in his interview with Reince Priebus. A lot less confrontational than Chris Wallace, and he got kind of a softer answer. I don't know what order these 3 interviews happened, but Reince Priebus seems a little more relaxed talking to NBC, which supposedly is like the most anti-Trump of the networks of the 3, at least. You know, CNN is, of course, the most anti-Trump network, where they won't even send anyone on CNN for the entire length of the administration. But anyway, here's the Chuck Todd NBC Meet the Press question on the same issue of Trump versus the media. Trump saying it's, you know, the media is the enemy of the American people, and Reince Priebus's answer in clip number 18 over here.
Now, let me ask you this final question here on the president's tweet. I'll put it up here. The fake news media, failing New York Times, NBC News, ABC, CBS, CNN, is not my enemy. It is the enemy of the American people. And look, I understand there's press criticism all the time. It happens with many presidents. But let me ask it this question this way. Aren't you concerned that now that the President of the United States does not have the moral authority to travel around the world and express the openness for a free press in other countries? A free press is being challenged in a Turkey, in a Russia. With the President of the United States trying to delegitimize the American press, does that not sort of undercut his ability to spread freedom and advocate for press freedoms around the world?
Well, first of all, it's nothing new. Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, John Adams have all had their issues with the press. I can assure you this, Chuck, and everyone in your business. The president believes in the First Amendment. He believes in the free press. I believe in those things. We don't believe everyone is lousy in the media. We don't believe everything is bad. But there are some things that are really bad. And we've tried to, he categorizes that as fake news. What we've been through over the last 10 days has been unbelievable. The leaks, the fake stories, the anonymous accusations, that stuff is bad. And that's what he's referring to. I know where he's coming from on this, but I can assure you he believes in the free press, the First Amendment. He loves our Constitution. We just want to get this stuff back on the rails and more honest in regard to these really big accusations that are coming at us.
I'm going to leave it there. All right. I guess thanks for coming behind enemy lines, and we'll see you next time.
No, I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you, Mr. Priebus.
So I edited in that last 10 or 20 seconds there. That was the end of the interview. There was part in between, but I thought it was kind of funny the way that Chuck Todd there said that coming on Meet the Press was going behind enemy lines, since all the 4 of the big 5 corporate outlets, not Fox News, but ABC, NBC, CBS, and CNN, they're all the enemy of the American people. And I thought that the way Chuck Todd addressed the issue there was kind of interesting, a little bit different. How can the Trump administration be an advocate for press freedom around the world when they're demonizing and attacking the press in the United States? And also, I thought Reince Priebus's answer was more relaxed there than the one he gave to CBS, which wasn't that confrontational, and he seemed like really defensive. And then, of course, the whole 7-minute epic answer with Chris Wallace, where Chris Wallace wouldn't let him go on the attack on the media. In a way, it seems like Fox News was trying to pay back the rest of the media when Obama tried to exclude Fox News from certain press events. The rest of the press stuck up for Fox News, and there you saw Chris Wallace, at least in that one instance, sticking up for the rest of the press. Anyway, those are the 3 Reince Priebus clips on Trump versus the press I wanted to show, because those are the only 3 of the 5 he went on. He didn't go on CNN, and he didn't go on ABC. But this next clip I want to show is actually from NBC's Meet the Press. It's Senator John McCain reacting to that same tweet where Donald Trump said that the press is the enemy of the American people, and John McCain definitely didn't agree with that, and he stands up for the press, even though it's kind of funny. You'll see he says he hates the press, and I hate you, Chuck Todd, or I hate you. Well, that's kind of the humor in this clip, but watch the clip carefully, because he particularly says that he's not saying that Donald Trump is an authoritarian or a dictator. He's just saying that that's what authoritarians and dictators do, which is not the way it's described in the subsequent clip I'm going to show from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, guest hosted by Jonathan Karl, where he, I think, misinterprets what John McCain says in this next clip to get Senator Rand Paul to attack Senator John McCain. But first, watch the original John McCain clip, NBC's Meet the Press this morning, over here.
I'm curious of your reaction to a tweet that the president sent Friday night. The fake news media, failing New York Times, NBC News, ABC, CBS, CNN, is not my enemy. It is the enemy of the American people. You believe the press is the enemy? Do you believe any group of Americans are the enemy of another group of Americans?
I was talking about the period, as you know, of the New World Order. A fundamental part of that New World Order was a free press. I hate the press. I hate you especially. But the fact is, we need you. We need a free press. We must have it. It's vital. If you want to preserve, I'm very serious now, If you want to preserve democracy as we know it, you have to have a free and many times adversarial press. And without it, I'm afraid that we would lose so much of our individual liberties over time. That's how dictators get started.
That's how dictators get started, with tweets like that?
No, they get started by suppressing a free press. In other words, in consolidation of power, when you look at history, the first thing that dictators do is shut down the press. And I'm not saying that that President Trump is trying to be a dictator. I'm just saying we need to learn the lessons of history.
Senator McCain, I'm going to leave it there. You are a student of history, that's for sure. I always appreciate you sharing your views, no matter how much you hate me. That's all right. Coming up.
That was kind of weird. I mean, was that a joke or was that not a joke when John McCain was saying he hates, and I especially hate you? Because Chuck Todd laughed at that, and I don't know. I think that was a joke. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But you noticed also at the end there that Senator John McCain specifically qualified what he was saying by, clarifying, I'm not saying Donald Trump is trying to be a dictator. It's just this is what dictators do. I mean, it was pretty clear from especially the very end of that clip that he wasn't saying that Donald Trump is, in danger of becoming an authoritarian, or, he was just saying that's what dictators do, I guess. But that's not the way Jonathan Karl over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos characterized what John McCain said in his question to Senator Rand Paul. And, when John McCain was talking to Chuck Todd, I think it might have been a joke when he was talking about how I hate you and all that stuff. But it sounds like Senator Rand Paul really does hate Senator John McCain the way, that is his focus in this answer. It's like, it's because of their difference on foreign policy where, in some ways I agree with what Rand Paul's saying here, that John McCain is like ready, any war, he's saying we didn't get there early enough and we didn't stay long enough, and he's like the interventionist and the nation builder, and a lot of that I think is true, but he just really doesn't like John McCain. Rand Paul does not like John McCain, I think, is the lesson of this final clip on the issue of the press, or Donald Trump versus the press. It starts with that issue, but it ends with Rand Paul does not like John McCain over here.
Fair to say that you are second to none in the Senate when it comes to fighting for civil liberties. So let me ask you about specifically what he is saying about the press. He is saying now that the news media is the enemy of the American people. You agree with that?
It's not something that I would say. I would say that there is bias, and I think it's fair to point out that there is bias in the media on both sides, both right and left, and that it's very hard to find objective news because we've gotten, particularly as you watch cable news, it's so dominated by opinion. And we are more polarized, and some of that comes from the people and some of that comes from the media. But I would say that I don't see in his criticism somehow, people think that the separation of powers means that the president can't criticize the judiciary. No, it has nothing to do with that. That's more of sort of political sensibilities, but has nothing to do with the Constitution or separation of powers. We don't like it. We may say it sort of treads on things, but the separation of powers is about legislative powers. It isn't about discussion or words. So I would separate, once again, words from actual real legislative action. If someone tries to put limits on the press, I'll be the first one standing up for the right of press, left and right, to continue saying and being part of the discussion and forwarding the discussion.
What would you make of McCain's statement that we're creeping towards a situation where people are potentially supportive of dictatorship in this country? Is that over the top, or is there a concern?
I think Senator McCain's perspective is colored by his disagreements with President Trump on foreign policy. If I were to look at foreign policy, I would say John McCain's been wrong on just about everything over the last 4 decades. He advocated for the Iraq War, which I think destabilized the Middle East. If you look at the map, there's probably at least 6 different countries where John McCain has advocated for having U.S. boots on the ground. John McCain's complaint is we're either not at war somewhere, or if we're at war, we leave too soon. So we're not there soon enough, and he wants us to stay forever wherever we send troops. So that's a foreign policy that is at odds with President Trump. And also the idea of engagement, the idea of foreign policy realism, I think fits more neatly with President Trump. And with John McCain, the neoconservative label of let's make the world safe for democracy and we're going to topple every regime hasn't worked. I mean, our intervention to destabilize the Assad regime has really made the chaos worse in Syria. And if you were to get rid of Assad today, I would actually worry about the 2 million Christians that are protected by Assad. So I think it's more a foreign policy debate, and Trump and McCain are on opposite sides of that debate. And I tend to sympathize more with the president that we need a change. We don't need to continue to have regime change throughout the world, nation building. It's expensive, and we don't have enough money to rebuild our own country if we're rebuilding everyone else's countries.
But just to clarify, what McCain said specifically is dictators get started by limiting freedom of the press. I imagine you agree with that.
Well, the thing is I don't agree with his analysis and applying that to the president. I haven't seen any legislation coming forward that wants to limit the press. I see President Trump expressing his opinion rather forceful in his own, his own distinct way. But I see no evidence that anybody's putting forward any kind of legislation to limit the press.
Okay.
So I think people, this is colored by John McCain's disagreement with President Trump. It all is. Everything that he says about the president is colored by his own personal dispute he's got running with President Trump. And it should be taken with a grain of salt because John McCain's the guy that's advocated for war everywhere. He would bankrupt the nation. And actually, we're very lucky John McCain's not in charge because I think we'd be in perpetual war.
He certainly did talk about changing the libel laws during the campaign. I want to turn to the
I mean, wow. I mean, was I right when I introduced that clip? Is the main thing to take away from that clip that Rand Paul really does not like John McCain, and especially his foreign policy, his neocon interventionist, whatever you want to call it. That was he's been waiting. He has all this stuff to say about John McCain. Whatever you ask him about John McCain, he has a lot of stuff he wants to say about that topic. And he's not going to be in any way prevented from giving out that opinion about John McCain, even though it really doesn't have very much to do with what John McCain actually said. Although Jonathan Karl, I think, spun what John McCain said to make it sound like he was pretending Donald Trump was becoming authoritarian when, like I said before I showed the clip from the last clip, that John McCain didn't really say that. He even specifically said that's not what he was characterizing Donald Trump as doing. He was just saying that's what dictators do, although I think John McCain kind of knew what he was saying, but wow, Rand Paul really doesn't like John McCain. So that's the last clip I want to show on the whole Donald Trump versus the press issue. And as I promised at the beginning, I have 2 really substantial clips from that's, I know that's a really a big topic, especially who are subscribers to The Amazing Atheist and Thunderfoot and people who I know I got some subscribers from over the years and who watch my videos sometimes. And so I wanted to address that topic. And I have to say I was really underwhelmed by Milo Yiannopoulos' interview and what he did on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. I didn't really like Bill Maher's cross-examination of him, although I thought his panel did better. But it seemed like Milo Yiannopoulos was kind of a paper tiger. I was expecting more, something more incisive and more savage. I haven't watched that much of him. I've read some articles about him back when, especially when I saw Thunderfoot was kind of befriending him over time and was highlighting some of his videos, and he's like this Breitbart guy and says a lot of things that are really ridiculous. And I don't think Bill Maher did a good job of calling him on it, although the panel did a better job. Overall, I thought he was kind of like stupid and superficial. Like I said, I was expecting more of an intellectual from what I had read, you know, someone who had more depth in his arguments. And I'll talk about that a little more after I show. First, I'm going to show a clip that's a little under 6 minutes long from the interview that was broadcast on HBO, where, like I said, Bill Maher did a really poor job of cross-examining Milo Yiannopoulos on his views, and especially on the whole free what Milo Yiannopoulos does. And I've even put a link down in the video description to this NPR program where they talked to an ACLU lawyer who defended Milo Yiannopoulos' free speech rights. And in general, I'm a liberal, and I support free speech, and I support the right of Milo to go to a college campus and speak. I also support the right of people to protest that, but not to prevent him from speaking in the violent protest. That's, you know, there should be enough security so that people can protest the speech and so that people can speak. And that's what didn't happen in Berkeley. But as I talked about last week, or I think it was maybe the week before last, I think the people who were violent and prevented the speech certainly weren't the students, and weren't the UC Berkeley authorities who actually allowed Milo Yiannopoulos to come on campus. But what's really disappointing about this clip I'm going to show from Bill Maher is they really only talked about criticizing comedians for the jokes they tell. And they start off, you'll see Milo Yiannopoulos actually starts off criticizing some female comedians for their jokes being too feminist, but then by the end they're like criticizing people for policing comedy. And I think the word police is really loaded because it seems to make you think, or it makes you think that it's the government who's criticizing or stopping or somehow preventing comedians from making these jokes, when it's really just other people criticizing the jokes of other, of comedians for being racist or sexist, which is, like I said, Milo Yiannopoulos starts off criticizing comedians for being too feminist. And I'll talk about this clip a little more after we watch it together here.
No, I know.
Should we go with Amy Schumer?
But I'm not. See, another thing. I love Amy Schumer. Her show. But that's okay. We disagree.
No, but these people used to be funny before they contracted feminism. It's like Sarah Silverman. No. She was really, really funny when she was cracking.
Now there's someone I'm a fan of. Let's get off this. Let's talk about your humor, because I think a lot of people do miss your humor. And I'm a guy who always defends jokes.
Yeah.
Right up to the point where they pointlessly hurt people. Do you think you've ever... No, I hurt people.
No,
I have my whole career.
I hurt people for a reason.
But...
For sure. No, I like to think of myself as a virtuous troll.
But if somebody gets hurt because of truth needs to be said, like religion. I've always attacked religion.
Yes. Well, you're sound on Islam, unlike most of the people on your side. So
yes,
you're
right.
very good.
That's true.
Subject.
But all religion, I always say, is stupid and dangerous. That hurts.
Except Catholicism, which is awesome, but otherwise, yes.
Okay. Well, that shows you. And I hope when you look in the mirror tonight.
I'm very happy with what I see in the mirror. I don't see Bruno in the mirror.
I'm not talking about what you see. I'm talking what's in your head. When you recognize that you are a Catholic, I hope you say to yourself, gee, I'm also capable of bullshit, stupid thinking.
Well, everyone's capable of bullshit, stupid thinking.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And that's okay. You know, it's a characteristic of the modern left, I think, requiring, this absolute consistency and forgetting that people are messy and complicated, and forgetting also some obvious other human truths, I think, some realities of human psychology. Like, for instance, the reason they want to police humor, which is very important to both of us, is that they can't control it, because the one thing that authoritarians hate is the sound of laughter, because they can't control what people find funny.
And also because when people laugh, they know it's true.
Yeah, of course.
Because
nothing annoys people or amuses people like the truth.
Laughter is involuntary.
Exactly.
When you laugh, even if you don't really agree in that part of your mind.
Exactly.
Go, oh, shit,
and so I go, when my college talks, you've got the professors at the front who are there to kind of monitor me to make sure I don't go off the rails. And I make a joke about Ted Cruz or something, and they're like, you can see it. You can see it. And the other thing that's really important is not just that, but the other thing is, humor isn't how you drive people apart. These sort of policing humor for racism and sexism is utterly wrong-headed, not just because normally it isn't there, but because that's how we build build bridges, not how we break them. You know, when you make a joke, that's how you connect with somebody. You know, you make jokes at the bar, you make awkward small talk. Humor's what brings people together, not what drives them apart.
Right.
And these basic, you know, fundamental human psychological insights, the progressive left is just forgotten.
The one area where I'm a little concerned is when you go after people individually. Because, like I said, I will, if it's in the cause of a greater truth, you know, if people are hurt as you know, collateral damage, I'll go there. But like, I didn't understand like the Ghostbusters thing. First of all, who gives a fuck?
I wrote a bad review of a movie. Am I not entitled to do that? I said she looked like a dude. She does. You know, I said that she was barely literate. She is. And I simply don't accept, I do not accept, that a Hollywood, you know, that the star of a Hollywood blockbuster, that an A-list mega celebrity is sitting in a Hollywood mansion crying over mean words on the internet. Get over it. And if you aren't over it, which I suspect you are, because it's not really the case that she's sitting there upset about mean words on the internet. Actually, she's been deployed by the studio because the movie's tanking. You know, you've just got to accept, I'm sorry, you've just got to accept mean words on the internet don't hurt anyone.
No, and also,
your Twitter feed, my Twitter feed, these are ugly, horrible things.
Every Twitter feed is. That's
no,
ugly.
they're not. They're wonderful.
They are.
When I had a Twitter, it was the funniest thing in America. It was fabulous. But you know what actually hurts people is things that happen in the real world. I mean, I don't go on about it because I'm not a professional victim, but I do get syringes through my door, dead animals through my door. You say you get mean tweets, that's okay. It's not a competition. But what actually hurts people is like murder, violence, you know, that kind of stuff. Mean words doesn't hurt
Which some people would say you have incited.
What? How?
I'm just saying some people would say.
Well, they would be idiots.
Well,
they would be idiots.
Yeah, okay. No, and I agree with you about the Twitter thing. I mean, I stopped reading most of my Twitter feed a long time ago because if I want to cry myself to sleep every night, I could just read my Twitter feed.
No, I love it. I get off on it. I love it. You know, I give my trolls marks out of 10.
But that's you, and you're a special kind of animal.
I'm a little broken. I give them marks out of 10. I used to retweet. I used to.
You're a little broken, and you're very wrong about certain things.
Like all comedians.
Well, like Black Lives Matter is a hate group, and that there's no such thing as white privilege. I mean, you do know that that's
We're happy to do, you know, look, we can disagree on those things, and that's wonderful. The one thing that should unite us, the one thing that I think that you and I can both agree on, and the one thing that was so remarkable when that, I mean, I've never heard of him before, that silly man who had a hissy fit this week who refused to come on the show, that doesn't understand, is that if you don't show up to debate, you lose.
Right.
And if you don't,
And also, stop taking the bait, liberals. The fact that they all freaked out
Wasn't
about
it
this
pathetic?
little impish British fag. You schoolgirls.
It's so ridiculous.
Right?
The only, look, if I am,
you know what?
If I'm any...
Somebody sent me this, which is so funny because they knew you were coming on. These are some things Joan Rivers, who, by the way, when she died, Obama, the liberal president that we all love, commented. They don't comment when someone dies.
She's a treasure.
Unless they're a national treasure.
Yeah.
He said, not only did she make us laugh, she made us think. Here's what she said on Michelle Obama. Blackie-O, you know Michelle is a tranny. Robin Quivers, bitch, you look like a fucking mudslide. I hate Houston. It's crawling with bugs. Oh, wait, that's Whitney Houston.
You know, my favorite...
Exactly, but that's the person we find to be a national treasure. I'm just saying the line is kind of...
So Milo Yiannopoulos is now Joan Rivers. I mean, I kind of like Joan Rivers, but I thought some of her jokes weren't funny, and she certainly wasn't the funniest comedian. I mean, but she was certainly a trailblazer, but some of her jokes kind of fell flat, and maybe... Some of those ones Bill Maher just read kind of fell flat. That doesn't mean that she wasn't a national treasure, but my biggest criticisms of what Bill Maher did in his broadcast interview of Milo Yiannopoulos is, first, when he talked about going after people individually, the one person he brought up was Leslie Jones, where I agree with Milo Yiannopoulos that she's a big Hollywood star, and it's not... the worst thing that Milo Yiannopoulos has done going after her, because that's, I mean, arguably it's like what they call punching up. If you go after people, you want to like punch up against the more powerful, not punch down against the less powerful. And Leslie Jones is arguably more powerful, although the things he said about her, about like being not literate, that's like awful and like not true. And Bill Maher didn't call him on that, and didn't call him on attacking less powerful people. It was not brought up until the overtime segment where it was a question asked about how Milo Yiannopoulos had gone after someone, a transgender student or staff member at some university he spoke at. And I mean, the one other thing I agree with from that last clip, though, is that I think it was Jeremy Scahill who didn't show up at Real Time with Bill Maher because Milo Yiannopoulos was there. And if you don't show up, you lose. That's what Milo Yiannopoulos said. And I think the biggest evidence of that is that when Milo Yiannopoulos did show up and people debated him, he really came off as weak and ineffective and non-persuasive. I was, like I said before I showed the clip, I was surprised at how ineffectual and how underwhelming his performance was. And even though Bill Maher didn't really call him on much of it, the rest of the panel did, especially Larry Wilmore in this subsequent, this is from the overtime clip. By the way, that whole interview is available at a link I put down in the video description. This whole overtime segment, this is the last clip I'm going to show, final clip of the night. This is the rest of the panel getting to take on Milo Yiannopoulos and doing a better job than Bill Maher did in that last clip for the final clip of my 200th episode of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. And I'll talk about it after we watch. It's a little over 7 minutes long. This is worth watching in total so that I can discuss it with you after we watch it together here.
All right. Well, let's start with you, Milo. Why did you single out a transgender student for ridicule during a recent speech you made on her campus? Did you do that?
Well, yes. First of all, wasn't a student. He had already left the university. And I make no apologies for protecting women and children from men who are confused about their sexual identity.
Well, I'm confused about who this is because pronouns are so important. If you call Caitlyn Jenner he, you're a bad person. So
yeah,
this
I did it on purpose.
You did. So this is a man
I
who...
misgendered this person.
Right. So this is a man, born man, who wants to...
thinks that he might be a girl.
Okay.
And
you have a problem with that?
No, I don't have a problem with it, but I think that women and girls should be protected from having men who are confused about their sexual identities in their bathrooms. That's not
unreasonable.
That person who was an activist who took their own university to court to force his way into the female locker rooms had already left college by the time I gave that speech. And that was totally misreported by the press, just like they misreport everything else.
Jack, where do you stand on weirdos peeing?
Well, it sounds like fake news.
Did you just call transgender people weirdos?
Just to fuck with him.
That's really rude.
I think you two are doing a great job with this topic. I'm going to continue to keep going with it.
I don't really know anything. I'm just the pop star.
I just think it's sad because the same arguments that we use against gay people, treating them like aliens who just wanted to fuck anything that moved, and that's why we should avoid them at all costs.
No, I think there's a big difference.
Well, let me finish my thought, please. No, it's true. There's a difference without a distinction because it's using the same type of arguments. It's like when people try to compare gay and black. Yeah, they're not the same thing. No. We share an invisibility. People didn't see us in society, and gay people hid out from society. Mm-hmm. But there were a lot of the same issues that you have to deal with when you're marginalized.
We understand people can be discriminated against.
Well, no, that's a group that's marginalized, and so the attack. You can always find an extreme person that becomes the object of your attack to assign that to everybody. So if you say, well, that person is weird or they want to commit sexual assault, then everybody thinks all transgender people want to do is commit sexual assault.
Well, they are disproportionately involved in those kinds of crimes.
They're what?
Vastly disproportionately involved in sex crime.
Who is?
Transgender people?
Yes.
Based on what statistic?
I don't know.
That's not a controversial statistic. And
it is a controversial statistic.
And frankly, you're saying, you're suggesting these people are the victims of some kind of discrimination. Well, I'm saying to you, this is a psychiatric disorder.
I didn't say discrimination.
This is a psychiatric disorder.
I said marginalization.
Like identity disorder or like sociopathy or something. I don't want these people around little girls in Boston.
No. I'm saying. Here's what I'm saying. This is what I said. The same argument we used against gay people. You should do your homework because
it was wrong then. It's right now. That's perfectly
No. Homosexuality was called a disorder. It was a psychological disorder.
Maybe it is. I feel pretty disordered.
Well, maybe you are.
Maybe it is.
But most homosexuals are not.
You know what? No, I think most gays have a long road, actually. I think, most gays have a long road to coming to terms with their sexuality, and
because
all
of
them end
because
up
of the way
happy about
society
it.
treats
No,
them.
of course it isn't. Don't be ridiculous.
No, of course it's the way society treats them. If society said we're fine with gay people in 1890, you think in 1990 people are going to have an issue?
You're being very obtuse. If I can't produce a child with the person I love, if I can't produce a child...
All I know is this. I have one quick question. I'm not a journalist, and I may just be an old spy, but you were talking about confusion. Were we talking about you?
What?
Because you sound very confused. You were talking about people being confused about their sexuality, their position in the world.
No,
I've been to Port Said in Naples, and you look like you've been there a few times. But because you seem to be very confused about who you are and what you
pulling your
are.
wallet out, sweetheart.
Yeah, that's all right, shipmate.
Oh.
No, I'm...
Okay, see, do you always have to fight with everybody?
I don't. We were having such a nice time, but you always invite such awful people on your show.
These are not...
They're so stupid.
Look at...
No, come on. You need to start inviting higher IQ guests, or this is going to be a disaster.
First of all, wait.
These are very high.
Wait, hold on, Bill. You can go fuck yourself, all right?
Yeah.
Jack, because
if this is the face of the Nazis...
If your argument is that these people are stupid, you didn't hear a word this man said early in this segment, because he can talk circles around your pathetic, douchey little ass for later. And one last thing, and I'll let you defend it. Leslie Jones is not barely literate. Go fuck yourself again for that one.
Read her Twitter feed. She can barely spell.
She's a very thoughtful person and very funny.
No,
Go ahead,
excuse me. She can barely spell.
Larry, I'm a great fan of yours, man.
I'm a fan of yours.
We are all about the First Amendment here, and Milo, go for it, brother, because I think what they did to you in Berkeley was atrocious.
Talk about strange bedfellows.
Are you kidding me? Why would that be strange? He's so handsome. That wouldn't be strange bedfellows. We'd make a lovely couple. We'd make a beautiful couple.
You're relatively
He's white, so I'd say no. But no, you'd make a beautiful couple.
Shut up for 1 fucking second. Really, look, this is the beginning of your career. People are only just starting to hate you.
I've got so many more years.
I'm just saying, you have the potential to morph. You remind me of a young, gay, alive Christopher Hitchens. But but you got to lose that kind of shit by telling them they're
telling people are stupid. They are being stupid.
This guy has done things that allowed you to fucking live.
All right.
It's just
Milo, what we would do. I don't know Larry that well. I do know Malcolm very well. Malcolm and I have debated many times. We have become friends. The four of us are going to go out and buy beer together, right? Republicans with our magic R will pay for it, okay?
Well,
I don't know because unlike the left people on the panel,
Milo, I have just one quick question.
Yes.
Are you the real true face of the alt-right? Because I thought the Nazis were in there. How did they take you on board?
This is one of the enduring mysteries of American media. How can this movement be an anti-Semitic, white supremacist, hateful, bigoted, racist, homophobic movement, and
with
a gay
great
Jew
pearls
who never shuts up about his black boyfriend is the head of it? Something's not quite right.
Yeah, except that they're not all your fans. Some of them are your fans.
No, they hate me. I'm saying this is the alt-right.
Then I like you.
Well, they don't all hate you.
No, you see, this is what the media doesn't report.
But
the Daily Stormer hates me. They declared holy war against me. The worst people on the very far left and the very, very far right all hate me. They all hate me.
Okay.
I think you're leaving out a lot of people.
But you're welcome here.
You see, it's a perfect...
Thank you. I'm the president. I'm trying to...
Perfect example.
Well, thank God for Larry Wilmore being on that show. I missed The Nightly Show. I was a big fan of The Nightly Show. I watch at midnight when it's in the Nightly Show spot, but why did Comedy Central get rid of Larry Wilmore in The Nightly Show? Now, more than ever, we need The Nightly Show. And I noticed, I was watching your live comments along the way. I noticed this one from Derek Weber. Go Larry! He was definitely doing a much better job than Bill Maher did in that previous clip, with some assist there by Malcolm Nance, the counterterrorism former spy guy. But just like I was saying in the previous clip, where is the big threat, the big, the intellectual heft, the huge arguments that we can't in any way refute from Milo Yiannopoulos. He seemed kind of like a lightweight to me. He was very self-contradictory. I don't understand why it is people don't want him to speak, although the one thing, I don't know what the facts are behind him outing this transgender student who he said no longer went to the university, but I don't know that. I don't trust necessarily his facts on that, and I don't know if those are the facts. And I have also heard that he's outed undocumented students at campuses he's gone to, and that's kind of the line between free speech and harassment or targeting that I said I would discuss based on what that ACLU lawyer said. Like I said, there's a link down in the video description to this one ACLU national lawyer defending the free speech rights of Milo Yiannopoulos and saying, the ACLU is not a defender of hate speech codes that say if you're offended by speech or even like mean words on the internet, that's what Milo Yiannopoulos was saying. That's free speech. It shouldn't be censored by the government. And I definitely agree with that. The tough questions that the ACLU lawyer didn't answer in that NPR interview is when it gets to the level of harassment or targeting, like outing someone who's transgender and basically trying to focus the anger of a crowd on an individual person who is marginalized and powerless, like this transgender student or some undocumented student. If Milo Yiannopoulos got up on a stage and said, there are these, they're rapists, they're criminals, and some of them may be good people, but we have to stop the threat of the undocumented, and this is the name of an undocumented student who is right on your campus. And there's actually a Supreme Court case the ACLU was involved with where for abortion doctors they put out these wanted dead or alive posters where they gave the addresses of the abortion doctors, and I believe the outcome of that Supreme Court case was that that was a true threat because they, said, we want to kill these murderers, these, murderer abortion doctors, and gave their actual addresses. That was too much individual harassment targeting. But where that line is, that's the real free speech question that never really came up on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, not even when Larry Wilmore did, and whoever that questioner was who asked about the transgender student. That was better questioning than Bill Maher did on the broadcast. You can let me know what you think about the whole issue. Like I said, that's the last clip I'm going to show, and I hope you appreciated all these clips I picked out, the 21 clips and the one still image from the National Intelligence declassified report about Russian hacking of our election. If you appreciated all those clips I picked out, you can support my ongoing Sunday clip roundup by becoming one of my monthly patrons on Patreon at a link I put down in the video description. Also, if not right now, pretty soon there will be a little eye up here in the corner where you can click and give me direct fan funding through YouTube fan funding. I will definitely be back next week and every week. Next week it'll be right before the Oscars, I guess. And I will still be doing the work I do every Sunday, watching all these shows, finding the best clips, and giving my commentary, my media criticism and political analysis. And I appreciate the over 300 people who joined me in the live show. I'm sorry about the out-of-sync audio. Hopefully that won't be a problem next week. Who knows? And my recorded show viewers, you can help me out by leaving comments, giving me a thumbs up down there. And until next week, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.